You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're Kiss!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
This is No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerds.
And we are now rolling through the album Destroyer and all things Destroyer, nerding out on Destroyer. And we had part 1 on the last episode, and hopefully you've caught that. If you haven't, stop what you're doing right now, go back and listen to it. And we're going to jump in here now with both feet and running hard on part 2. You know, it was more of a feel that they were achieving.
Yeah, and they're probably putting layers and things like that too, and with like different guitar tones. And I'm sure Ace wasn't around for all those either.
I'm wondering if Ace even plays lead on Detroit Rock City. I'm wondering if Dick Wagner did that.
I'm thinking of guitar tones,
like
quickly
Ace
in my
may
head.
have cut a version.
But maybe kept a Dick Wagner version.
And he might have kept a Dick Wagner version.
I haven't read anything to confirm or deny that.
I've
but
never
that's
heard anything,
interesting.
but I'm just going by it doesn't feel like an Ace solo to me. Not because of the way it was written, but just the way it's performed.
The tone and everything too.
Well, so I'm going on Cap's mind frame and kind of backing you up. So I'm thinking about tone. I'm thinking specifically on Sweet Pain, since we know everyone's confirmed Sweet Pain for a fact. I'm really thinking about like the way the guitar kind of feedbacks and echoes, because I'm sure they did it all in that same session. He had to. I'm sure Dick didn't come back multiple days. He did it all in that one afternoon. So it's going to be a very similar guitar tone on anything else he does. So a good accent point to think on is that ring out note when people are going Sweet Pain. That does sound very similar to the God of Thunder lead solo notes. If you think about that roomy and airiness, it does share very similar dynamics. And another spot that it does is King of the Nighttime World. Ooh. And I would wonder if, because Kiss weren't the writers of that, if Bob had him come in to help get some of those segments down, simply because, well, they didn't write it anyway. Let's just make it sound right.
It's possible. That's what the big question mark is exactly what did Dick Wagner do, and how much time did he spend on it? And it just seems like, given the time and the detail that they put into all this, and he's coming in and just kind of laying it on top like real quick. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but
because you do hear that big room tone. I'm thinking of the harmonizing solo bits in King of the Nighttime World. The boom 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 da 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 da.
Where else is he on this album for sure? And and like I said, is there places where maybe he just mimicked something Ace might have done and just did it better, a little better? Mm-hmm. Just like, let's just.
Because as much as we love Ace, unfortunately, even by his own account, this is around the time where he started getting a little bit more freedom and money, so the drugs and alcohol were a little bit more present.
He was playing the rock star part, like super hardcore in public at this time.
The debate, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So Shout It Out Loud is written on piano. That's a collaboration with Gene Paul and Bob Ezrin.
Yeah, and I love those low piano notes. They play along with the bass
punctuate
too.
The bass, that's one of the notes I've got. Mm-hmm. And it's their, probably an effort to supplant Rock and Roll All Night with another, Shout It Out Loud,
another anthem,
anthemic. I love this song. I just, it's very poppy, but it's I like the lyric because it's kind of how you feel. See, I think this is a thing that's lost. It's a generational thing where, the parental approval of rock and roll was not very prevalent in the 70s. It was very, very, it was still a very much a.
I'd agree with that.
Where if it was, just viciously hated in the 50s, by the 70s it was just.
Yeah.
And
now
there's
it's
that
like,
great line, don't let them tell you that there's too much noise. They're too old to really understand.
It's such a great line.
They don't even say your parents. They just say, don't let them. Then it's like, who? Well, your parents, obviously. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I could remember, I don't know how old I was, but my brother's 4 years older than I am, and he went to a party. And I'm like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to a party. Whose birthday is it? Because I was like, you had a party? That's what a party was. Birthday. No, man, you stupid. It's a party, just a party. You mean they just have parties for no reason? Well, this stuff didn't click in my brain when I was like, 7 or whatever.
I mean, you're right. It is a total generational thing because you got a song like this for the 70s and then 80s, Fight for Your Right to Party. It's like that song is totally lost on a generation now.
You never get anyone to write anything like that today because it wouldn't make any sense.
No, because young kids would call it dad rock these days.
No, we're not getting into all that.
Well, that is what it is,
but one of the few Kiss tracks where it's a duet with Paul and Gene.
Yeah, I like that. There's that kind of. It's not really a call and response. It's just a shared lead.
Shared lead, yeah. And I remember the first time hearing this with really good headphones or really good speakers and hearing that piano bit and it catching me off guard. Because, of course, when you're a kid, you don't either fully pay attention or you have the shitty boom box you have to listen to on everything. But it's like the day I had like the decent earbuds or like, the nicer room stereo. And I finally heard that don, boom, 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 boom.
It gives it all the atmosphere.
It's so
that
cool.
Opens it up in a much, kind of a larger kind of scope to what, and that's what he's trying to do with everything here, obviously.
Exactly, and that's why it's a great album.
And a small thing that I think people also take for granted that I took for granted until I heard that really crappy like 2014 re-record they did just to get the rights back to use for Guitar Hero and sync rights and everything. They re-recorded that one. But something that people take for granted is when you pay attention to the chorus, they are genuinely shouting it out loud. They're not going, shout it, shout it, shout it out loud. They're going, shout it.
Yeah.
They are genuinely passionate about yelling, shout it out loud. And you can feel that through the chorus. And you took it for granted because on the re-record, they were trying to hit the note. So they weren't really pushing it anymore.
Both on the original, but I see what you're saying.
But it genuinely sounds like 4, 5, 6 guys just yelling, shout it, shout it, shout it out loud.
Everybody gets their little moment in between the chorus bits on the last one when it's like the drum, when it's just the drum and the vocals.
It genuinely just sounds like a whole bunch of people yelling and having a good time.
Well, it does. It has a kind of coming into towards the end of the song. It feels very. I'm trying to think of the right word.
Like the R&B gospel thing that we keep alluding to with him.
It is a little R&B, man. Now that I'm kind of dissecting it into that, because Paul, especially fast forwarding the Alive 2 version, Paul's really going, come on, everybody, Gene.
It's got the big kind of celebratory kind of. It's very large.
It is. It's so awesome.
It is, and then it stops almost abruptly.
Yeah, and then
whoop, ring. And then goes right into Beth.
Mm-hmm.
And now Beth, no one had any faith in this song.
I think
other than Bob Ezrin.
Yeah, it's like
he was very insistent about having this included.
But I also feel like Bob had so much faith in it because it matched up with what he was already writing. Because from all accounts, even Peter's own book, Bob basically whipped this song into shape.
Oh, of course.
It came from that original song called Beck.
Beck, and it was written by Stan Penridge. And, of course, Peter gets a songwriting credit regardless. Right.
But I think he really took a liking to it,
But this song was written as a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The joke was...
old lady's calling you,
like,
we're going to go home.
You got to go home. And the whole thing was a joke. It was mocking. And they turned it into, he's like, as Nigel Tufnell so famously said, it's a fine line between stupid and clever.
Yes.
And, so he takes this thing, Bob Ezrin takes this thing, and turns it into something completely different. Because
Much to the dismay of Paul and Gene, too. They did not want it on the album at all.
Well, and the irony is, of course, it's going to become the hit off this record, but it's when they recorded it, along with the symphonic stuff with Great Expectations, Peter sang it live in the studio. They didn't use that take.
Yeah.
He was doing what they call, a ghost vocal or a scratch vocal.
Scratch, yeah.
But by all accounts, his vocal take on that was really fucking good. And everyone was like, whoa, never knew you had it in you. And like, even the orchestra were like, he said they got up and they applauded and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, that probably, of course, made Peter's ego swell about 5 times.
So you read his book, his account, all of it. It's like the most proud moment of his life at that point.
It should be. It's even though, technically, I don't think he had very
so much of
to
it
do
was
with
spoon fed to him.
But hey, you know what? It's still a great song.
It is.
And the vocal take they do have on it is good. And
now, do we believe that it took anywhere between 30 to 50 takes to get it?
I don't know. Who knows?
All 3 of us have been in the vocal booth.
I have not.
We know how quickly those takes add up.
Yeah. I don't think it probably took as many as that. I don't know.
So,
it does. Again, what you get though, it's if he has to put work into it, you know what? That's what you're supposed to do. Does it take 30 or 40 takes sometimes to get a guitar part right? Maybe, no one wants to own up on their own shit. It's like, how many takes did it take you to do any one difficult thing?
I'm not telling you.
Well, I'm not saying. I'm saying this.
That was my way of owning up to the fact of, hey, I'm not shitting on 30 or 40 takes of something. I'm just not going to tell you which ones of mine it was.
Here's a funny story about this though. Because of the Joyce Biowitz Neil Bogart affair, Neil Bogart leaves his wife. And her name is Beth. And he sees this as a very large and a very, very big joke at him. And he's
I never knew this.
And he was not at all pleased by this. And this will come into play when this song becomes a single, but we'll come back to that here in a minute.
Yeah, no, I never knew that story. Because again, I guess I didn't know as much of like the ins and outs of like the inside of the company.
We can talk about this right now if you want, since we're in the song.
Since it actually connects.
So
stay there.
Depending on who what story, I think is probably there's no one aha person. I think it was a couple of people all having the same thing. So Beth is the flip side. The first single off of Destroyer is Detroit Rock City.
Right.
And by rights, it makes sense. Where are you going to try to break this single at? Detroit.
Yeah.
What's the biggest radio station in Detroit? Well, the biggest radio station in Detroit isn't in Detroit. It's across the river in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. If you've ever been to Detroit, literally, it's across the river.
Just a bridge.
Yeah. I mean, I was just up there recently and my daughter was like, wait, you mean that's Canada there?
Wow.
Yeah,
so I would have had the exact same response.
Yeah, that's Canada. And the radio station in Windsor was CLK or CKLW. And it was a big AM powerhouse station, and it was an important station to have because its reach covered Michigan, Upper Ohio, which is Toledo, Cleveland. I think you could get it
the heartland.
I think you could get it like in Erie, Pennsylvania. And of course, the upper part of or the lower part of Ontario, I guess.
Yeah.
So it was an important radio station to break a single. Their program director was a woman named Rosalie Trumbley. Rosalie Trumbley was very revolutionary in that it was a female program director. She wasn't a DJ. She was the program director. I mean, she chose the music. Famously, Bob Seger wrote a song called Rosalie. Then Lizzie picked it up and did a version.
That's the first thing that popped in my head, actually.
And it's about her, which she would not. She refused to play it because she felt nepotism. And she allegedly was the one that was like, well, I don't think this song is very strong, but I
like this Beth song.
This Beth song could do really well. But generally, I think it's credited for a DJ in Columbus, Georgia, that also did it. And so I think all this was happening more than one place.
And also, quick side note.
Or it was being suggested by program directors to, I think the guy's name was, I want to say it's Scott Shannon. I don't have that. If I have that wrong, I'm sure people will maul me on it. But he was the I guess he was an A&R guy for Casablanca. He was the guy that was like helping push these singles.
Right.
And a little
And so
footnote
it was
on
relating
that.
back to him, and he was relating it back to the.
It can be found on
record
YouTube
company.
and stuff. If you listen to that single edit of Detroit Rock City, no wonder they flipped it over. That is a really bad cut job on that song. So it's like they did not give this like that single justice. It did not sound good cut down like that.
They have to have it into a format that's going to fit AM. Again, you got to remember the AM was king even at this point. FM was growing, but Top 40 radio was still the domain of AM radio, and
Still had to have 2.5 minutes to 3.
yeah,
or,
was that yeah?
Yeah, but when you check out that 7-inch that they were sending out to stations, that cut of Detroit Rock City is not
Well,
good.
it doesn't do well until they flip, and then again they're trying. When he relays back to Neil Bogart, it's like, hey, I think the B-side might really do well here. Beth, they're making fun of me here. I don't like that, And so it met resistance on the label, which is kind of unusual. But eventually, they all saw the potential in it, and obviously, it worked.
And now,
and what's interesting even more is again where things start to overlap. By the time Beth, as an A side, starts breaking as a single, and it reaches, I think, number 7. It's in November of '76. And by this point, Rock and Roll Over is already out.
Mm-hmm. And the odd thing for me too is, so we already mentioned how starting from even recording, the band didn't even like the song, didn't have faith in it. Bogart saw the song as an internal joke to him. So now you've even got someone high up at the record label that's not even a fan of the song.
Not high up, highest up.
The guy. The man. How did it end up on the B side of a 7-inch? That seems like something they would have actually just buried it, left it on the record, and been like, we're going to leave it there to die.
Who decides that? Who decides what the singles are going to be?
Right. So it's like, it seems like if everyone from the band to the top of the record label hated this song so much, they wouldn't have even included it on something like, ooh, look at these 2 songs on the upcoming or the current record. That's very odd.
A B-side is a B. I mean, it's a B-side for a reason,
But you think that was a Bob call, as far as like, this better go on the record or
maybe?
Whatever.
Well, I mean,
I wonder if that's maybe part of a contract thing he has.
Because that was kind of his baby too.
Well, at any rate,
arrangement wise,
Yeah, at any rate, it made it, and it made that album, because had that album tanked, and it kind of sort of almost did.
And I mean, this is according to Peter's book, but they say that folks came up to him saying that song saved the record.
It did save the record. That's not.
We only have one more song left on the record,
Yeah,
which actually is, let's go ahead and touch on that so we can talk about reception.
Do You Love Me? This is another one. This is another one that is largely. This is. I think this is probably 80% Bob Ezrin, and I think it's about 10% Kim Fowley, and then maybe 10% Paul Stanley. And I don't know if Stanley would acknowledge this or not, but Kim Fowley, I think, wrote most of the lyrics to this.
Yeah, I was picturing that in the King of the Nighttime World lyrics and their kind of arrangements and things like that too.
But I mean, and I think Paul just kind of did a rewrite of the lyric. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it does. Yeah,
and I think musically, I think this is probably 100% all Bob Ezrin. I can't say that definitively.
But those harmony guitars and things like that, and which you didn't hear on the first 3 records, really.
Well, yeah, there's just the way the whole arrangement of the song, all that coming in. Yeah,
you never heard that on Kiss stuff before.
Never heard stuff like that, And then never mind the production value, which of course he has the tubular bells at the end, which is great. Chiming, the big chiming bells.
I love that AM blowhorn or air horns, megaphone thing. Thank you. Sound they put on Paul's vocals on the black sunglasses makes you look just like a queen.
I mean, all of it. I love this song. I think I love the studio version.
I do.
And
I used to hated the live version when I got that first concert DVD.
I've always loved the song. I think it's, you know, and it ends in that same kind of. I mean, it's that same kind of vibe that Shout It Out Loud ends. It's really large. It's got the chimes and it's
anthemic.
It's anthemic, but it, you know,
I need you to.
And but it shows, you know, and this was the thing that Bob was very adamant about. He wanted to show vulnerability lyrically, you know, instead of, you know, I'm a rock star.
Suck me, fuck me.
Get on your knee, you know. This is, but do you love me? I'm a rock star, but do you love me? Mm-hmm. You know, that kind of a thing.
Right.
As opposed to, you know, do you love me because of who I am, or do you love me because I'm a rock star?
And I love that.
Where everything else is, I'm a rock star. You love me. Mm-hmm. You know.
Do you really love me?
But now it's and again, that's a point that shows that that's obviously a Bob Ezrinism. I don't think Paul would have ever brought that into the table at that point.
No, because he still saw himself as larger than life.
And you know, but it's funny because again, you grow up with it, you don't hear it any different. You don't recognize that sort of stuff until you really kind of start thinking deep into it. But you're not supposed to. It's a pop song. It's supposed to be, you know.
Your layman is not going to pick that apart, you know, upon hearing it.
Now, when they started playing this live on the reunion tour, they played this extended coda part. Do y'all know what I'm talking about?
Boom,
apparently, I don't know if this is true. I've read somewhere, and I can't remember where, and it isn't in any of the information that I cited, you know, any of these books that I've been examining and stuff. But apparently that part was recorded, is what I've heard. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then it was deemed too long and they cut it out.
If they had recorded that would have been interesting to include on that Destroyer Resurrected.
Yeah, that's when I thought, that's when that came out. I thought for sure it was going to be on there because I had heard that somewhere or read it somewhere. It may not have been done, but it seems like that I had heard that was recorded as meant to be the, you know, kind of the.
And speaking of the Resurrected thing, it took me until that release. And now I can't unhear it. It's not something they added. It's in the original mix. But I don't think Peter ever did it live, and Eric Singer certainly doesn't do it. There is an extra ghost kick in that beat. We typically hear it as boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba. The actual beat, and if you listen to Resurrected, you can hear it a lot clearer. And if you go back to the original press, you can now hear it. Now that it's been brought up.
Right.
The beat is actually boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom. He adds an extra kick beat to it, and he doesn't use it live. Singer definitely didn't do it.
Well, you think maybe that was doctored in the recording?
I'm not sure, possibly, but either way, it's on the original mix. But after the Resurrected one, where they kind of cleaned up the kick and it's a little bit more present, all of a sudden I heard that extra kick, and I went back to the original to see if like maybe that was an addition for the remaster or whatever. No, that beat is in the original, but it's just you don't hear it because you're used to hearing live versions where you hear it super clear, boom, pop, boop, boop, pop, boop, pop, boop, boop, pop. So yeah, that was my one little odd thing that I heard finally in the mix is there's an extra little kick in there.
That's interesting. I never noticed that. I gotta go back and listen to that.
I do too. Normally, we can make this a subject later on in the episode about how we feel about the Resurrected.
Well, let's talk on that real quick since we're at the tail end of this now.
Thumbs up or down? What do y'all think?
Honestly, because it has not replaced the original, thumbs up.
Yeah.
I just don't like the way the guitar. It's like some of the guitars are kind of buried in or the vocals are way higher in the Resurrected mix than some of the guitars are. I just don't like that balance, but that's just my only little critique.
It seems it seems the whole thing seems a little brighter.
Yeah,
but you know, I don't see a radical difference in between them.
The main difference I hear is in the drums. They cleaned up the drums and kind of made it a little tighter.
The thing that's interesting about Bob Ezrin, and this came up when they did Double Platinum, which we'll discuss at another time, but you know, they remixed all those songs and they've realized that all of that stuff that Bob Ezrin puts into the mix is in the mix. It's like on the master track. You can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing I was curious about. When they did Resurrected, it was like, well, what can they really do? They can't take anything out. You know, they can't. You know, for instance, I'm referencing, let's say, the Beatles' "Let It Be Naked,"
Yeah.
and where they took all the Phil Spectorisms out. You can't take the Bob Ezrins out. You got to keep it all in, and because it's there, it's on the master, it's recorded into the track.
And honestly, until
it's not a radical difference, and it seems kind of wholly unnecessary.
And it was, especially at the time. Honestly, if they had done it now, they probably couldn't have done more with it. Honestly, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more advances in audio technology to where if Ezrin actually did have his master tracks, if he ran the guitars through specific programs now, it would be able to compress out and liven up like echo rooms and like kind of take out reverb and stuff like that. Back then, the technology wasn't quite as good, which is why it did sound a little bit more robotic.
This is what, 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2014, when it came out.
Not quite, 8 years ago. Then.
But honestly, I mean, eight years ago, technology versus now, I mean, next year, the stuff we're dealing with now is going to even be outdated.
Go back to 1976 when they recorded this, and they're probably using, 12-track machines maybe?
Well, but that's just the crazy, not to get off too much of a tangent, but it's like that's the crazy thing about the way technology ran, though. It was so slow up to a point, and then all of a sudden now it's just hit light speed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there's not too much of a difference. Honestly, on the Resurrected version, I really like God of Thunder. It got a lot of hate, but I like that version. They separated the guitars out a little bit more. They made the drums a little heavier sounding, and they boosted the effects a little bit more. Like they brought the kids up some, you could hear them a little bit more clear. I thought God of Thunder really, really benefited from this. The one thing they did that I despised, and as soon as I heard it, I went audibly, I said, they George Lucas'd it. They made a bigger explosion sound at the end of Detroit Rock City into King of the Nighttime World. They put a different explosion in it, and that literally made me feel like I was watching a George Lucas special edition. I'm like, they replaced an explosion.
Oh, it's Hayden Christensen. God damn it.
There's a part in Detroit Rock City they have that I absolutely hate, where they do the chorus on the tail end of the lead of the guitar solo.
They got to put they add that little.
I hate that being there.
But apparently that was originally part of where it was supposed to be.
Well, it wasn't on the final finished
one you
thing,
had,
and that's not where I want it. And God damn it, why would you put it back there now?
And one other odd thing.
It's very distracting in the middle of that, and that's the best part of the solo.
And the Kiss nerds will yell at us if we didn't mention this. The one other addition they changed, or the one thing they changed on Destroyer Resurrected, is, according to legend, Paul misspoke the line right before our namesake of the podcast. He goes, moving fast, going 95. The lyric we hear is going 95.
Yeah, he's going down 95.
He was supposed to say down 95. So when Resurrected, he actually has Paul saying down. He was able to grab down from get up, get down.
That's the little. They even make a note of that in the liner notes. Like, do you know
what do you guys feel about that?
Oh, I don't. That's not an issue to me at all.
I don't think it adds or takes away anything.
I mean, other than to be a little, interesting. But after that, it does nothing for that song.
It's very weird listening to it though, because we all hear moving fast, going 95. We hear that, but then now when we hear it, it's like going fast, down 95. It's like it still hits you a little weird.
That comes to a point of being so trivial that it's a triviality.
Right. But hey, we're Kiss nerds. That we're supposed to talk about on this show. And no other show is going to be debating should we hear down or going other than No Time to Turn.
I mean, I think we might have. I must have noticed that at some point, but it just didn't.
No, what's going to happen is somebody would have commented saying, "Why didn't you bring this up?"
And that's why I had to do it. And in Beth, they put an acoustic guitar back in the mix. Because Peter even mentioned, he said, there was an acoustic recorded because he did an interview with Eddie Trunk around the time Resurrected came out.
Dick Wagner played the acoustic on that.
Mm-hmm. And he said that an acoustic was recorded during that time, but they cut it out of the mix for the final product, but they brought it back in for Resurrected.
Well, the other thing I noticed is on the news report at the front of Detroit Rock City, you talk about these little trivialities.
Yeah.
He talks about the kid got killed on Grand Avenue. Well, it's not Grand Avenue; it's Grand River Avenue in Detroit.
See, this is the reason people tune in. Trust me, it's the reason I do the show.
I love it.
So now they've got the finished product. They've got to have a title for it. Or is there anything else you're gonna?
Not musically, but talking about they have the finished product. Not quite, because it ties into something you discussed earlier. At some point during all of this, they have artwork drafted before they even have the title.
Well, that's what I'm getting into here.
Okay, cool.
The design guy is Dennis Wallach. He contacts Frank Frazetta, the famous fantasy artist who did famously, I guess the most recognizable Frazetta stuff would be the Molly Hatchet covers.
Okay.
I
can see that now.
And then the Flirting with Disaster cover are both Frazetta. And
it doesn't match the music at all.
Well, Frazetta, I think that Death Dealer cover could have been a Destroyer cover.
Oh, he's talking about Molly Hatchet. How the Molly Hatchet covers do not match the music at all.
Yeah, it's a little off.
Marvin Martian singing Southern rock.
So anyway, I like the Molly Hatchet, all right. So he contacts Frazetta, and Frazetta finally says, okay, but I get to keep the art, and anything after the album cover you have to license and blah. And they're like, no. It's the other way around, dude.
This is Kiss.
Well, they haven't gotten to the merchandising quite point yet, but they see the potential in that, and they know this is going to be used in a lot of probably different ways. We're going to have a T-shirt and everything else. Yeah. And so they find a guy named Ken Kelly. Who coincidentally is Frazetta's nephew.
No shit.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And he had been doing cover art for these sci-fi magazines like Creepy and Eerie. And I don't,
I'm looking up his album artwork credits, and he did some work with Rainbow, and he wound up doing Love Gun and stuff by Manowar, and totally fits the vibe
I think this is his first album cover, though.
It is.
And the way I understand the story is that he's on a very tight time constraint. They need this by a specific time. And so and he refers to them as the brown and the blue covers. So the first attempt is with we'll call them the Alive costumes.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they've changed their costumes at this point. They're like, no, it's different costumes. There was also allegedly an issue with the cover being perceived as overtly violent, which I don't get.
Because I've seen all three variations, 4 if you include the resurrected version, and none of them seemed extra.
Well, when he flips to the from the brown cover to the blue cover and changes things, you notice he doesn't make a lot of change there.
No,
because apparently Dennis Wallach did not convey that information that the record label felt it was too violent, because he thought it was silly, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it, and I think that because it was muted from that kind of orange brown, which felt like fiery, I guess. I don't know. I'm just speculating, to the more subtle blue, violet. It softened what the record company felt was tone. What's important to note about this is if the record company has that perception of something that doesn't seem overtly violent, they're already thinking in a much different. They're starting to focus the idea that we need to appeal to a certain audience here, and our audience seems to be young, and we don't want to do anything that's going to appear to be, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, R-rated. And so everything has to be PG from this point out. And, this ultimately would lead to a detrimental, measure for Kiss. But
wouldn't really see its fruition for another 3-4 years, but it's definitely the start.
But it's the start, and that's just an interesting thing to note. The album title comes from a guy named, I looked this up actually, a guy named Vinnie. I don't know if I'm probably going to butcher his last name, DiGerlando. And evidently there was a list of titles, but he, I think, putting 2 and 2 together with the working album artwork, Destroyer.
It's a great title, especially for a band like that.
And what I just find interesting, though, is so if during, and the reason this is why I was wanting to bring it, because at first I thought you were just going to talk about, them starting to hit the road again after recording.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were initially getting to, and that's why I was wanting to stop. But what I found interesting, though, is if they had their Destroyer costumes during the time period of recording, or at least during the symphonic portions, and that's when they did a lot of the photo shoot with the bikes and everything else, why Ken had Alive and Dressed to Kill costume references, especially if he was on such a tight time frame. It seems like he would at least have those references to help with that time frame.
That's a good point, and I can't even begin to think that they would be so absent-minded as to go, oh yeah, we forgot to tell the guy that's doing the cover art that
we have new costumes, especially if they're going all through the trouble of taking the photos because they knew.
They've already got photo ops done in the new costumes, even though they're getting ready to go on the road again in their old costumes.
Yeah, that clearly states that they're thinking about the future.
Because they're still in the cycle. Again, this is where stuff is overlapping. They've recorded Destroyer. Now they're going to go on. They're going to go tour Europe. Well, they do kind of. I guess I want to say Ontario and
if
Quebec.
memory serves me correctly, because I see both of y'all pulling out your phones. If memory serves me correctly, they were in the middle of their Dressed to Kill tour when Alive came out.
Well, yeah, everything overlaps. So I'm just saying, but this cycle that they're still promoting is Alive, and they did I lose my notes on this? They tour Europe after they do some Canada dates and 1 or 2 spotty U.S. dates, but they're still doing essentially cycling out the Alive stuff.
Yeah,
they're still wearing that costuming, but as we know, when they go to Europe, they're starting to weave in these new Destroyer songs. So that famous footage now, which was kind of a big deal when it popped up.
Oh God, I remember
Detroit Rock
that.
City and wearing the Alive costumes.
That and Flaming Youth, they were doing those two.
Some other things that are happening. I guess they do. Ace gets married at this point in May 1st, and of course there's some footage of them getting up at Ace's
I think
wedding.
it's on one of the Kissology DVD sets
it's
too.
one of the little Easter egg things. I think it's on disc 2. If you scroll up to the logo, it highlights, and if you click it, it's the whole crew, no makeup and tuxedos and stuff, using the house gear, rocking out to Rock and Roll All Night. It's totally awesome.
It's interesting to me they're playing their own stuff. They can't really necessarily jam out on other people's stuff.
Well, I relate.
There's a story that I read in one of these books, and again, it may or may not be true, where they showed up at some kid's house and they're going to jam, but they can't because all they know is their own stuff. So they just sort of sit in the corner and watch these kids jam, which is funny to me.
I don't know where I've heard it, but I've heard that exact same story.
But you don't know if that's a true story or not, but it's a good story. It
is, and I relate because I don't jam either. Because with Cap and I, we have our own band called the Fill-Ins, and our lead guitarist Mikey is great at that. He can just bust out just a little riff and start going, and our drummer, he's really great at picking that up, and he can start tapping along. Cap, he's pretty good at plucking along on bass stuff. I'm standing there I have no clue. I'll start just kind of doing vocal stuff on top because I don't know what to do on guitar, so I'm not a jammer either.
You'd be surprised how many famous bands are like that.
Yeah.
Well, they like I say, they continue to tour across. I guess they do kind of upper eastern Canada. I guess they call that the Maritimes. I'm not sure. They go to Europe, and again, we talked about this. We've introduced the new material. The shows in Europe, though, are in a lot of smaller places.
Yeah.
It almost like they feel like they kind of step backwards, I think, a little bit because they
Paul
haven't
talks
broke
about
Europe.
that.
And, they finally started hitting arenas in America, but in Europe, they're still playing.
They're kind of starting over.
Yeah, they're kind of starting over, but...
who's the opener on these European dates?
I I don't have that.
I was going to say the one thing I didn't really dig into is tour stuff because I knew that the actual recording process and everything wrapped around Destroyer was going to be so heavy. I honestly didn't dig too much into the tour.
Same here.
Mainly because also I'd like to actually, but not even talking about the dates, the stage setup is even worth talking about more than the actual dates.
Before we get to that,
Yeah.
There's an important thing that happens though in May of '76, and that's when Bill Aucoin brings in Carl Glickman and Howard Marks. Now, he already, for their business managers, these guys are going to come in, but they came in investing $100,000 in KISS up front.
Right out the gate.
And wonder where that money went.
Well, who knows? Now, they already have a connection with Howard Marks through Howard Marks Advertising, who Dennis Wallach, I think, is actually employed by. And, you know, yeah, you can say it's cynical, but I don't think it's cynical. It's just business. They see the opportunity as an inroad to get towards Casablanca, which is, in fact, what happens. Howard Marks Advertising takes over advertising for Casablanca. So it's a win-win for everybody there. But they... you know, being their business managers, they start wanting to renegotiate everything, and they insist a new contract. Now, this is something that's important to note right now, but it'll be more of an issue later. The contract they're asking now, they want $500,000 in advance for each album, plus an additional $500,000 for advertising. So $1 million per album up front they want from Casablanca. Where they'll take 15%. Bill Aucoin's commission is 25%. And there's an interesting clause in this new contract that they work out.
Is this the Neil Bogart one?
What?
The one I'm thinking of was where if Neil Bogart's not part of the deal, then KISS, anything that the members of KISS get involved with, it doesn't matter, in so many words.
Maybe that might be in there, but the thing that's interesting to me is there's a proviso in this contract that allows for 4 individual solo albums.
I was going to bring that up, but I didn't want you to immediately frown at me and be like, no, that showed up later. I was going to bring that up.
76.
Okay, yes, you've now hit a thing with me I thought was just legend, but you've now got confirmation. That threw me for a loop when I saw that they were already, that was a provision that was in there in the Destroyer era. That means they were already thinking about marketing these individual people as their own entities.
Well, they also just 4 solo albums. I mean, and what's interesting, these solo albums, we'll talk about the details on that once we get to them.
Right, but the legend on that the entire time is that was the moment of clarity idea to keep the band together during that time of doing like Phantom of the Park, Alive 2, Double Platinum. That was like their eureka moment of ooh, this is what's going to help keep everyone together is do solo albums.
Give everybody their own well, that probably played into it, but no, they already had the position. They already had that position that they could do that,
and that's crazy.
That's part of their deal now. Meanwhile, you know, they're going to go on They finished the European dates. They come back. There's a moment to breathe, I guess.
First time in probably the first couple of years, there's finally a chance to breathe.
But how it's going to be, but while they're over in Europe, Destroyer's released and comes out. Now they've got to come and support Destroyer, and now they're going to do the new costuming, the new stage. So they've got this new staging that is, they've contracted the Jules Fisher organization. And 2 guys named Mark Ravitz and Mark Kruger have designed this stage, possibly with Sean Delaney's input, or possibly streamlined by Sean Delaney, depending on the story. Now, Sean,
I thought of every bit of it.
Well, no, it's just, Sean Delaney claims at one point, it was his idea, to have an individual kind of, the staging is designed to have individual little
sections,
areas that theme to each member.
Right.
And at some point, though, their original road crew pretty much all of them, I think, except for maybe one guy, is fired.
Yeah.
Because they have to bring in this new crew to do this more elaborate staging. They have to tear it down and set it up and all this.
Yeah.
Which is the beginning of, that sort of kind of, I'm sure those guys felt pretty burned by that.
I know that JR and a few others all got together to do a book.
Yeah, I have not gotten that book.
I haven't either. I'm not sure if it even fully got released, but I did kind of listen to the little press run they were doing. And yeah, it definitely feels like, they were kind of hurt by the whole thing because they saw it all as a brotherhood. They were like, we would live and die for these guys. That was a very
close-knit little organization, and they had built this thing. And now it's starting to finally seeing the fruit of the labor.
And now they're kicked to the curb more or less.
Well, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
And I know that they really took that personally and really saw that as a Gene and Paul move. They've said it without directly saying it. But man,
it was
like,
not a Gene and Paul
move. I don't think so it was, because for the amount that, even the most diehard loyal Gene and Paul fans out there, we can all step back and look and go, yeah, they've done some crappy things, but at the end of the day, they have proven themselves to stick by people that have done right by them, for the simple fact that they go right back to Ken for that Sonic Boom album. Granted, it didn't look good, but they still came back to him. Right. They revisit people from their past.
That wasn't Ken Kelly on Sonic Boom. That was Michael Doré.
He had something to do with it because he was doing a lot of promotions for the artwork.
Well, Michael Doré did the cover.
Interesting. But I know that because around that same time he was doing other promotions, but they still do go back and refer back to people that did right with them.
I think this was a matter of it wasn't a matter of any ill will or feeling like they were incompetent. They just probably felt like this is a professional organization. Yeah. We're going to bring in their crew to set up and tear down this professional blah 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 stage.
Yeah, nothing personal,
now,
just business deals.
Sean Delaney claims they came in one time, and this might have had something to do with the crew being fired. They were griping a lot about this staging. I don't know what the story is here. You know, Sean Delaney has got different stories depending on. It seemed like how his mood was on any given day.
Interesting.
But at any rate, we know the original road crew gets cycled out here.
And talking about, complaining about the staging, I mean, let's kind of draw a little bit of a comparison. Even though that stage didn't last for very long, they kind of went from a whole stack of phony cabs, a candelabra, and a light-up logo to all of a sudden, like you said, three kind of individual sections, a brand new drum riser. At the end of the night, they had like these lights at the top that would be lit up by sparks or something along those lines.
I'm not exactly all sure.
But yeah, they had scaffolding up there with different new lights and all this.
Supposedly all of the front lighting was going to be supplied by just Spotlight.
Okay.
And all the backlighting, they had the towers. They look like power towers.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring.
Kind of trees. And then they had the lightning bolt things that kind of flashed. They were colored red, white, and blue to coincide with the bicentennial, because 1976 was the bicentennial year. And of course, Peter had the cats on either side, and
it's like Egyptian cat statues.
So it was all themed, and then they had the first variation of the staircases on either side of the drum riser.
So it basically went from a super high class version of what any three of us would carry along if we felt like being big money on stage, to all of a sudden Alice Cooper show on steroids. So yeah, I can imagine how these rough and tumble, getting it done guys are all of a sudden bitching. They're like, there's like 4 times the amount of crap to put up every night now. At
some point, there's a story, and again, I don't know that this is true, where they kind of came in and just started tearing down stuff off the stage, going, we don't need this, this has got to go, this has got to go, this has got to go. Because supposedly there was a big tree that was supposed to whip around like it was in the wind or something. I don't remember. I've read about different things, and who knows? I mean, there's stuff that just didn't work. They were going to use the
that was going to be
generator.
Part of. I'm sorry, I just remembered that tree was going to be part of Gene's area because he had that tower he would go up, and the tree was going to be behind the tower and interact with him and stuff like that.
It was some corny idea.
I would have loved to see that stage performance, Gene talking to a tree.
They were going to have, is it called a Van de Graaff generator, the lightning spark thing?
Like you see in Frankenstein.
Yeah, supposedly that was the same actual set piece that they were going to use,
because they only made a few of them,
and it proved to be just too unwieldy and didn't survive it. I don't even know if they used it. This tour opens in Norfolk, Virginia, at the Scope Arena, which is a cool building. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that
I
building.
haven't actually.
And the opening band is Bob Seger.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because, like, to this point, Bob Seger and Kiss have been perennial openers, kind of running, and now Kiss has kind of lunged ahead to be the headliner. And now, obviously, we know Bob Seger's about to eclipse them. But
with his own live album,
it's an interesting era because I think about like Bob Seger, all these bands that were like the perennial opening acts for everybody in this era, all are going to turn out to be big acts in the tail end of the 70s, early 80s. Groups like Styx, REO Speedwagon.
And Gene and Paul love taking credit for that.
Oh, whatever. They were part of that. They were part of that. It's like a Bob Seger, of course.
Ted Nugent's on this list.
Well, that's they
see Montrose with a baby Sammy Hagar.
Well, on July 13th, they play the first stadium show, which is at a place called the Roosevelt Stadium, which was just across the river from Manhattan in Jersey City. And so they're playing literally underneath the New York City skyline, and it's a hometown gig for all intents and purposes. What's notable about this show is that's where they met Chris Lent, who would be the tour accountant and be very close to them for the next close to 10 years. Well, more than 10 years, I think.
Yeah,
10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And he's a very important person, and we're going to probably cite his book for a lot of stuff here too. I'm citing, of course,
he's a very good source.
Yeah, and I'm citing a lot of this from the Alive Forever book by Jeff Suss and Kurt Gooch. I don't know if is it Suzz or Suss? I don't know, but it's a great book. It's worth finding if you can.
Kurt also does a lot of good work too.
Yeah, the stadium shows are interesting on this because. Like we said, July 13th, the Roosevelt Stadium, they got Chris Lent. That's where he gets introduced to the band for the first time. There's some pictures of the Kiss with Linda Lovelace that have popped up in recent years. That was that night.
For our younger listeners, she was the 70s equivalent to a Jenna Jameson, or am I dating myself with that name now?
Jenna Jameson still might be a little dating yourself.
Might be.
Yeah, well, you know what? She was no Jenna Jameson.
Fair enough.
She wasn't even a. I don't know.
Let's start going down. This is a different podcast.
I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was a lovely lady.
I'm sure she was very sweet.
I know she had a particular talent.
She had a particular set of skills.
That particular talent. I mean, I don't. There's things I don't understand. There's some things in this world you just can't explain.
But yeah, Bob Seger's on a good chunk of these dates in 1976.
Bob Seger opens most of these shows, and unless it's a place, unless there's something he can do on his own, he's on the whole tour, and that's the first time I think they've really booked the whole tour with a single opening act.
Detroit Boy too.
The road crew at the time. Somebody I read noted, Bob Seger was a very, sturdy. He was a great live act, and there were points where they were just like, they're really going to have to up their game tonight because Seger just
his band just ripped.
Away. Yeah.
Wow.
Check out this Atlanta date, August 29th.
Yeah. Well, before we get there. Before we get to the 29th, August 20th, they're in the famous Anaheim show.
Which we got YouTube footage
Which is really the pinnacle of that tour. And probably, arguably, maybe one of the pinnacle successes of the band. Now, granted, that show is loaded. They've got Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, and Montrose.
God, what a bill.
What a bill. I mean, and they got Flo and Eddie as the guest MCs. They're the guys that a lot of people I don't think even realize that's who it is that introduced Kiss. The video exists of that show, and they're dressed up in wild garb. Flo and Eddie are Howard Kalin and Mark Volman, who were in the Turtles.
Oh.
And they by the early 70s they had lost the legal right to use their own name. It's a long story, but they sang backup on so much stuff that will surprise you.
Were these the singers that were on the Frank Zappa lineups and all that too?
Yeah, they were with the Mothers for a good couple of years. And then they were the high-pitched kind of vocals on all the T-Rex stuff,
Okay.
Their big hit was Happy Together.
But their big hit was Happy Together.
Got it.
they appear on tons of stuff, and they're clever, funny, witty guys. So it seems like, and their solo albums are great. Bob Ezrin produced one of their albums. Solo album, it's not a solo album, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He produced one of the Flo and Eddie albums. They're all really good. But let's go on to the, I mean, I don't know, is there anything noteworthy of Anaheim other than the event happened? And it is caught on video.
No, I think, how much more tour info do you have? I don't want to step on toes of stuff that you may have.
I'm kind of highlighting these stadium dates because I think it's interesting that they're already hitting some stadiums, and some of them are successes and some of them are not, but the ones that are, they're loaded shows.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Kiss is headlining, but I could see how this might be perceived as a bigger event than just Kiss.
Yeah.
But it benefits Kiss to be the band. They're they're the headliner. So
now, because they were doing the stadium stuff, did they eventually have to cut back down to theaters? And
they're still playing arenas now. They're full on in arenas. I don't think any of the dates they've done other than that is.
So then I wonder, and I could kind of have my facts a little bit wrong, but I feel like that main stage that we discussed only lasted partly through the tour, because there's not a whole lot of video of that. Like we in retrospect have a decent amount of footage from Kiss to Dress to Kill era, and then a ton of footage from Alive.
There's not a lot of Destroyer stuff, yeah.
And then there's an okay amount from Rock and Roll Over and tons from Love Gun and Moving Forward, but there's very, very little in comparison for Destroyer. Yeah. And it always kind of led me to kind of feel like they kind of either abandoned the stage show, the tour wasn't very long, something kind of happened during that run that caused there to not even be a lot of even like fan recorded stuff out there.
There's there's the stuff that's come up in the last 10 or 12, 15 years, whatever, is the Detroit show and a Houston show and then Anaheim.
Yeah.
But you would think that somebody would have had the wherewithal to think we need to get this caught on, but there's no really good professionally recorded Kiss show except for maybe the Largo 77.
Well, Kobo's really done well.
It's done pretty well, but most of these are from live feeds in the arena. These are the reason why these exist is because of like with the Houston, you see a lot of bootlegs from the Houston Summit and a lot from Kobo because they had in-house video feeds, so that tape exists. Winterland had its own in-house video. So that's why you see a lot more of that. And then later on, the Capitol Center in Largo, Maryland had in-house video, and that's where the Largo video comes from.
Yeah. And I guess just kind of putting everything in comparison, because, perspective is everything. I mean, think about the people that were around Kiss, like Sean Delaney, Bill LaCoin, people that were in television and knew the power of visual. And if they sunk so much money into this huge stage show, it would almost seem like even if Gene and Paul are too, inundated with, worrying about new records and everything else, even if they're not thinking about let's film this.
Management should be thinking about something like it. Well, we'll get to that in a minute because we're going to close with something. But let's finish out these dates. And again, I'm just highlighting stadium dates. You said August 29th, Atlanta at the Fulton County Stadium.
Yeah, get a load of this lineup. 38 Special, Blue Oyster Cult, Edgar Winter, Johnny Winter, Bob Seger, Kiss.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Blue Oyster Cult's important with this because it gets brought up with every book, every memoir, where Blue Oyster Cult was their who they were opening for prior to all the success, and now Blue Oyster Cult is opening up for them.
A year to the day.
Yep.
Yeah. But again, this I don't think is so much. This feels more. Again, it's an event. It's a bigger event than just Kiss.
Yeah,
you could say that, which would help. Ensure a draw. I mean, they at that show, I think they had.
This show probably had its own name.
Yeah, it's like a mini festival almost.
I don't know. I don't find a lot of information on that. There seems to be a lot more information about the Anaheim show than there is this Atlanta show. But
I just thought that was interesting. That's like the Drive at 5.
But a couple of these stadium shows that they have scheduled get canceled, and I don't, for whatever reason, maybe they can't, they're not that strong of a draw yet,
right?
Because their next one is in Toronto at a place called Varsity Stadium, and I'm citing the Alive Forever book on this, and they only drew 13,500 people in this stadium.
In comparison to...
Which is a good house for an arena show. That'd be a sellout probably in an arena. But for a stadium that holds 40,000 people...
I was about to ask.
That's that's kind of meager. Seeger was scheduled for that show but canceled, but I don't know if that had any effect on the... I don't know when he canceled or when it was announced that he wasn't part of that.
Right.
So,
that's interesting, though.
And also, we don't know how much of a pull he had for that tour either.
Right, but I'm sure he was, because this is right at the beginning of his Night Moves era, I would say.
Okay.
Let me look that up.
They finally, the tour winds up on September 12th in Springfield, Massachusetts. Somebody else might need to look this up. To your ends, and this is, I think, is a good hard cap in for the Destroyer era, is then they go and they film the Paul Lynde Halloween special. And I don't have a date for that.
See the Paul Lynde TV show where they're all interviewed in full makeup and full costume and everything, but the song that's performed is Beth.
Right.
Well,
they perform 3 songs.
There's 3 songs, and they're all Destroyer songs. So this is only a week or so before Rock and Roll Over is released. So coming off of September, they're going to go into the studio and start Rock and Roll Over, but they're still cycling out the Destroyer thing with this appearance on the Halloween. This is an important thing because I think this is on primetime ABC.
October 29th, 1976.
Yeah, that's when it aired.
Yeah,
I don't know when it was recorded. I meant to get that, and I don't have it in my notes here. But and of course, famously, they're on the show with Margaret Hamilton, the original Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, who we
in
all
costume.
grew up with, and she's in costume. Witchy Poo, who had been the character off of H.R. Puffin Stuff, which was the flagship Sid and Marty Krofft thing, which in the 70s there was a glut of Sid and Marty Krofft shows, these kind of weird children shows, the most popular of which was Land of the Lost. So, again, we're on a show that's kind of a kid-friendly show.
We got Tim Conway and Betty White on this lineup, too.
Yeah, and so, and Roz Kelly, who was on Happy Days as a character called Pinky Tuscadero, and they introduced a character as Pinky's little sister, Leather Tuscadero, who was played by
Susie Quattro.
But I think it's interesting to note that this Halloween special, again, it's very kid-friendly, but it's their first primetime major media exposure. And I think, it's
kind of
promoting
ABC
Destroyer.
in concert not be?
No, that's like late night. That came on at probably 12 o'clock, 12:30, 1 a.m. Something like that. This is prime time. Got it. This is 8 o'clock.
Is this when the perception of Kiss as like the demonic Knights and Satan service kind of gets skewed?
Well, they're trying to, but I think it fits a Halloween thing. And here's the interesting thing to note is that Destroyer has not done well, and not to what they had hoped. Fans have not responded to this album. It's maybe won over some new fans, but by and large, a lot of Kiss fans are not pleased with this because of what we were talking about earlier. It's so dense and it's so kind of cold. It doesn't have that kind of raw, loose feeling that Kiss were known for, that raw excitement. It
has the ballad.
Kiss Alive is... that's what you think Kiss is, and now they've come in with this heavy concept kind of where you're not even sure what the concept even is,
Right.
It's just, what is this? And so it seems very, very left field for them at this point, and it has not done well. And it's only at this point when they start promoting Beth that things are going to start turning around for that record. And of course, they're going to come in right underneath it within weeks now of this airing, this Halloween special with the follow-up Rock and Roll Over, which we'll talk about on the next episode.
For sure. And you think with Beth, that gains a new audience, and of course, like contributes to more sales. But the fans stick around for the tours, and they're still going to shows.
Yeah, but the fan reception on Destroyer was, from what I heard, just was very much divided.
Yeah, it's a kind of a divided thing, and it informs how they go into making the follow-up. But we'll discuss that on the next episode. And we got anything else to add here?
I was looking up to see if I could find filming dates for the Halloween special, but no, I couldn't find any on there.
I saw it somewhere, and I meant to write it down. I totally
Yeah, I'm only seeing the airing date that Kat brought out, which was October 29th.
Yeah.
And that kind of capped off the whole Destroyer run, and things are going to, again, things start kind of overlapping here because, hence why I like to call this No Time to Turn, and how apt it is.
Well, where does this record kind of sit for you guys in the Pantheon? Because we usually wrap up talking about that.
Well, I recognize that now history has shown it to be the definitive Kiss album. Mm-hmm. It is the one, and most people know this probably better than any other. It's not my personal favorite. I like it. I think it's a great record.
Yeah.
I think everything that Bob Ezrin's putting into this is important to note for when we come and revisit his later work with the band. He was not trying to make, very consciously and very obviously not trying to make a record that sounded like like they did live. Yeah. He was trying to capture a feeling and a vibe and create drama and whatever else around it. It was the same kind of approach that he took with $1 Billion Babies with Alice Cooper. It's
same
everything,
treatment, boot camp.
Yeah, he's very consciously not, he's not trying to capture the vibe of a band live in the studio. He's trying to make an album that is very self-consciously not a live thing, and it makes probably playing some of this stuff live difficult, which, why they never really touched much of it.
Just Do You Love Me? Shout It Out Loud. Detroit. Let's see.
King of the Nighttime World.
They
play a lot of it.
But yeah,
I still see what you mean, though.
But it does. It's not. It doesn't hit quite the same way. He's got it skewered in a particular way.
And honestly, for me, where I kind of stand with the record is, I kind of agree. It winds up being the definitive Kiss record. You see that in the Dynasty album cover the most on T-shirts and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's probably the most recognizable image. But honestly, when you really kind of have to look at just purely songs, it does crack my top 5, but it's not my immediate go-to for when I want to go listen to a Kiss record. Right. And it's not because any of the songs are overplayed. I can put on Detroit Rock City right now and enjoy it. It's not like a rock and roll all night situation. So I find myself enjoying the songs on there that don't get as much love, like King of the Nighttime World. Yeah. I'll listen to that one way faster. I'll listen to Flaming Youth really fast. So I find myself digging into those, and then occasionally even like the Shout It Out Louds. But I wouldn't say this is like my immediate go-to. And it's almost kind of, not necessarily unfortunate, but it kind of sucks that wound up being the definitive record and not like a Rock and Roll Over or a Love Gun, something that, in my opinion, kind of showcases the band a little bit more.
Yeah, it's not one of my favorites either, but I have a new appreciation for it, dissecting it and kind of picking apart, the production lines up, because I'm a big fan of, producers in the 70s and just kind of, picking those information notes and things like that too. Because of that, I've got a new love for it, but again, it's not one of my top 3 by any means.
I just wonder, and we'll wrap this up, but I wonder, had they stayed with Bob Ezrin to continue, a working relationship much as he had forged with Alice Cooper, what, if anything, would have been different, and how it would have been?
See, I can go into a whole other podcast with a theory behind that.
And I have a theory
moving into... discuss that more on the next one, but...
I do actually have a theory on that a little bit moving into the next one. We'll talk about it on next episode. But I feel that actually the band took a lot of what they learned from Ezrin, condensed out what they didn't like.
Oh, yeah.
And applied it to the next record.
But I'm just saying, if they continued to work with him, making these, kind of Sonic movie kind of records, how different the whole thing would have felt and been moving forward. But, we can only speculate.
Absolutely.
And as we see, the things are just as fast as they've had to work, as hard as they've had to work for the previous 3 years now, 2.5 years, 2 years, really. I mean, it's so fast. Now, when success is starting to hit, they're going to have to work that much faster and harder. And we're going to see that things are going to kind of start really, as fast as everything's been going, we're seeing this stuff starting to overlap as we go into the rock and roll over stuff. But that'll be the next episode, which we hope you will join us. And I hope you've enjoyed our talk as we've looked at Destroyer. And we'll hopefully see you all again when we rock and roll over.
I love it. I could not use that.
So for Cap Nunn and Alex Duff, I'm Russ Ward, and we'll see you next time on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.